So I wanted to share something with all of you that I actually shared with the Israel Teaching Fellows Rehovot group a little while ago, and it's the concept of a relationship bank account. So a relationship bank account is just like a regular bank account. So if you go to an ATM, you have some options, just like you do with all of the interactions that you have with other people you encounter. So looking at one section here, we have your checking balance, you're getting your updates, kind of just seeing where things are. This is something that successful organizations implement pretty frequently. One such organization is the Union for Reform Judaism, Camp Newman. I was a head of session this past summer, and every single Saturday, we sent out a form to all 700 kids to check our balance, to check our relationship, to see how camp was doing and how even second or third graders thought they could make changes to the relationship or kind of continue where things are going. Looking at another aspect of a bank account, we have a deposit. Just like with your financial bank accounts, deposits add to a relationship. Then we also have withdrawals. Withdrawals are things that take away from a relationship. So with that in mind, I want to talk about making meaningful deposits, because just like with your bank accounts at home, you want to get as much money as you can into your bank account, just like you want to make the most amount of deposits in the relationships that you have with other people. So let's think about how all of you make deposits. So if I could have everybody in the room raise their hand. When you've thought of a way that you've made a deposit in someone else's bank account, go ahead and put your hand down. When you've thought of a way that you've made a deposit, put your hand down. Perfect. So go ahead and keep that way that you've chosen to enhance someone else's life in your head. And let's talk about types of feedback. So some of you may have said or thought that you make verbal deposits. You tell people how you feel about them. You say, thank you so much, or I really appreciate this. And we're going to take a look at how our feedback conversations can go. So here we have a little graphic. On the vertical axis, we have positive and negative would theoretically be here, and general and specific on the horizontal axis. So we have 4 different categories of feedback. The first one is in the lower left, and it's general and negative. So some examples of this: you're stupid, you're useless, big withdrawal. These are things that, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, don't do any good for a relationship. Now let's take a look at the other type of general feedback. Oops. Great job, good work, nicely done. Vague things that are like a woohoo type thing. Small deposit, just a small deposit. So more than half of the people who receive feedback at work don't get useful feedback, which is a huge problem. We give feedback to people in order to influence their behavior, right? So if we're saying woohoo, and if your boss says that to you and you've done 10 great things, you don't know which behaviors your boss is trying to get you to repeat. So let's talk about specific feedback, the feedback that is going to actually enhance those relationships. Again, we have positive and negative, and let's start with the positive. An example might be, thank you for being so optimistic when others weren't. That would be some very specific positive feedback. And as you might expect, that's a big deposit. And I want to talk about negative specific feedback for just a second. So an example of this might be, please refrain from checking personal email during work. That might be something that a supervisor would say to a subordinate, to an employee. This actually is also a deposit if it's delivered correctly. So I want to talk a little bit about how negative feedback can be a deposit. I want to tell you about my friend Michael. My friend Michael is one of the greatest people in my life, one of my biggest role models. I worked with him when I worked for Apple for about 1.5 years, and the first thing he ever said to me was, "You're already in my way." So that kind of gives you an idea of how our relationship went. Very sassy, lots of jokes, wonderful. One day, though, I forget exactly what he said. He said something that crossed the line for me, something that I found really offensive. And I think we were texting back and forth, and I texted him back. I'm like, hey, that wasn't cool. I'm really disappointed by those words. They were hurtful, things like that. And I actually brought that up to Michael just last week when I was making this presentation. And I want to share what he wrote to me. Kind of the bottom part of this text message, I'll read it in case people can't see. You showed true friendship that day in giving me the benefit of the doubt and allowing me to show you how much I truly care about your feelings. It could have been easily dismissed. This was after I criticized him. I told him something that wasn't easy for him to hear. And the way that that was a success, the way that that conversation shaped behavior and deepened our friendship substantially was with just a couple points. So whenever you're giving negative specific feedback, there are a couple things that you want to be sure to keep in mind, right? We're not attacking a person. That when we start attacking people, that's when it turns to be a little bit more general and it's not helpful anymore. So we also want to make sure that we're talking about a specific behavior, right? So if we're giving feedback that's going to be useful, it's not you're a bad employee, you didn't complete anything ever. We want to make sure that we're targeting specific things. And of course, it has to come from a good place. The desired income should always be to improve the situation. Otherwise, it's not good, not useful feedback. So with all of that in mind, I just wanted to recap and remind everyone that as leaders, that's all of us, everyone in this room, we need to be checking in with people regularly. It's not our subordinate's job, it's not our employee's job to check and make sure that everything's going well in that relationship. It's up to us to extend that first, and then maybe open up the line, open up the dialogue, open up the communication. Also, it's easy to make really, really meaningful deposits. It's not something expensive, it's not something time-consuming, it's just a careful choice in language that can make a huge, huge difference. And as always, don't forget that every single interaction that we make is either a deposit or withdrawal. Someone actually just shared with me who heard this before Leanna was telling me that she talks about how her interactions are deposits and withdrawals and checks the balance of her accounts with her friends on a regular basis, which I think is a great thing to do. If you're interested in any more information, feel free to check out my website. I wrote about this in a little bit more detail, and with that, I hope that you all make some deposits for the rest of your time here and kind of carry that on with you. Thanks.